The father of our country, this fellow right here, ran up a $200 ice cream cabinet in one summer. And we're talking a time when 10 bucks bought you a really fast horse. But old George set the mood. At 22 plus quarts per person per year, America is a frozen dessert nation. We lead the world, and we've got a taste for the good stuff. Problem is, good stuff isn't cheap. Cheap stuff isn't any good. Luckily, Sprinkles, we've got the technology, the ingredients, and the know-how to successfully frolic on the frigid frontier. So stick around. We're gonna play it cool with a few frozen classics. We'll scoop on some tools, visit a dairy, meet a mighty tasty orchid, and ponder endothermics. Sounds like fun? Sounds like good eats. Good eats! Beyond the flavors, the ripples, the sprinkles, the chips, the chunks, the magic that's frozen desserts all comes down to water, sugar, air, and the occasional fat, all dancing to a tune called cold. Now, sorbets, like all the desserts we call water ices, are born from simple syrup. But as this sucrose model clearly shows, there's more to simple syrup than just sugar water. See, it all has to do with the way these hydroxyl groups stick out from the rings of the sucrose molecule. They promote hydrogen bonding, and since water is basically a hydrogen-based atom, yeah, whatever. Look, the sugar in frozen desserts is more than just a sweetener. See, once dissolved in the liquid, the sugar molecules actually get in the way of ice crystals forming. Now, as more water does freeze, the remaining liquid becomes more and more concentrated with sugar, which continually lowers the freezing point. That means that an ice or sorbet is little more than tiny ice crystals suspended in a supersaturated sugar solution that's basically never really going to freeze, not all the way. Now, too little sugar, and you'll need an ice pick to serve your dessert. Too much, and you'll have a syrupy mess. So, the trick, if you can call it a trick, is in nailing the right amount of sugar. And for that, well, all you need is your trusty psychrometer. Lent yours to the neighbor, never got it back? No problem. A few simple rules will do. Now, when I want a scoopable ice, I go with 7 ounces of sugar, roughly a cup, to every 16 ounces of liquid by weight. Now, that's roughly 30% sugar. Now, the liquid could be water or a mixture of water and unsweetened fruit juice, but since they don't contain any sugar, which would throw off the equation, flavored sparkling waters work well. I usually keep a few bottles of this on hand anyway. And I'm going to substitute 1 of the 2 cups of sugar that our recipe calls for with 1 cup key lime preserves. Adding preserves to frozen desserts is good science for 3 reasons. 1, you can count it as you would an equal amount of sugar in the recipe, tablespoon for tablespoon, cup for cup. 2, it's a great way to introduce flavor. And 3, pectin, the substance that thickens preserves, make ices smoother. Not only do the large pectin molecules prevent ice crystals from getting big just by getting in the way, but when smaller crystals melt on the plate, the pectin holds them in a gel state, which means a slower melting dessert. Ain't science cool? We're going to start by dissolving about a cup of our lime preserves, along with a cup of sugar and about a cup of the lime seltzer over medium-low heat. We don't want to let this boil because the pectins in the preserves will be damaged, and we need those little molecules. So just stir that to dissolve. We're also going to add the zest of 1 lemon and 1 lime. The zest only, none of the nasty white stuff. And the juice from said citrus. But hold back about a tablespoon for fine adjustment later. Then the final ingredient, not to be missed, salt. Just a pinch. Now I know, you're saying, this is dessert. What's salt got to do with it? Well, salt enhances flavors, especially the kinds of flavors that could get lost in all this sweetness. Believe me, you will never notice it's there until it's not, if that makes sense. Yeah. Stir until dissolved. Once everything's dissolved, go ahead and add the rest of the lime seltzer. Slowly. There you go. And then give it a taste. Now remember, when we eat this, it's going to be cold, and cold numbs the tongue, so it needs to be very strongly flavored at this point, very sweet and very tart. I think it could use a little more acid, so I'm going to add the rest of that citrus juice. Give it a final stir, and then pour it into a wide, clean, lidded container. Now here is one of the crucial points of making frozen desserts. The mixture has got to be cold before you freeze it. See, cold liquids support seed or baby ice crystals better than warm liquids do, and that ensures a fine grain, which is what it's all about. So take the extra time and chill. To achieve the smoothness and creamy texture that is the hallmark of sorbet and ice cream, you need small little ice crystals in air frozen right into the mix. And that, my friend, takes technology. Now, the modern ice age began in the 17th century when science types figured out endothermic effect. That's the ability of salt and ice to combine and form a liquid that's actually colder than ice itself. Anybody who's churned ice cream or driven a Detroit street in winter has experienced endothermic effect firsthand. Now, the next big breakthrough in ice cream technology came with that little contraption, dreamed up by one Nancy Johnson in 1843. Had the New Jersey housewife known she was handing America a century of dessert superiority, she probably wouldn't have sold her patent rights for $200. Bet her great-great-great-grandchildren are still steamed about that one.
Uncle AD, this isn't as fun as you said it was.
Everything about the Johnson machine was wonderful. It was revolutionary. A seal drum submerged in an ice brine, turned by a gear around an internal dasher, a churn that scraped the baby ice crystals from the walls of the can while whipping air into the mixture. It was perfect. What?
This is getting harder. I want my money back.
That's when you crank even harder. This is why manual machines are still the best. See, when you feel resistance, you know the mix is ready to take on air, so you crank even harder. See, electric versions, they can't do that. Air is what gives American-style ice cream its light body and not too chilly mouthfeel. Now, Italian gelato doesn't have nearly as much air in it, which is why it has a denser, colder mouthfeel. Keep cranking! Welcome to Ice Cream Italian Style. Now, long before Mrs. Johnson got her crank out, the Italians were crazy about frozen desserts. The Emperor Nero, in fact, well, besides being just plain crazy, was so crazy about ices that he actually had slaves go up in the mountains and harvest snow, which he then hid in caves so that he could enjoy it year-round. Now, unlike the American tradition of ice cream, which depends on cream, or the French tradition that revolves around egg custard, Italian gelato is usually milk-based, so it's a slightly lighter product. Now, when it comes to technology, well, while we were busy developing space shuttles, the Italians were busy perfecting Mrs. Johnson's dream. This high-tech wonder here is state-of-the-art and represents about a century of dogged innovation. Luckily, there's some middle ground between Mrs. Johnson's, well, less than convenient contraption and that dairy Ferrari that we saw a few minutes ago. See, in the last few years, there's been a veritable spawning of countertop ice cream freezers, and some of them are perfect for the modern kitchen landscape.
Come on, we don't have much time.
Hello, W.
Hurry up, AB. Unless you've got $1,000 in your pocket, you want to stick with a countertop model, one that utilizes a sealed canister containing a solution capable of delivering sub-freezing temperatures.
Sub-freezing temperatures, of course.
This little electric version is simple, reliable, easy to clean, put that down, and includes an automatically reversing motor that cranks out a quart in about half an hour.
Quart and half.
There are several makes of this kind of design, but this one has a chute for adding ingredients during operation.
Sweet.
Now go freeze, AB.
Time to turn. Our ice cream machine is turning. The lime ice mix is cold and ready to turn. And this is all there is to it. There's only about a quart of liquid here, so it's not going to take more than, I'd say, half an hour to soft set, which is what we want. So why do we really need one of these? Can't we just chunk it into the freezer? Well, without agitation to promote lots of little baby crystals, a 30% solution, like the one we have here, would freeze into a big ice cube floating in a syrupy mess, which isn't too appealing. But if we were to cut back on the sugar, well, that would be another story, one we think is worth telling. The Italians are masters at ready-made desserts, and their icy granita is the perfect example. As a matter of fact, the most famous form of granita is based on something that us Americans throw down the drain every day: coffee. Now, espresso would be preferable, but strong coffee will do the job. We're going to start with about 2 cups of hot Joe And into that we'll dissolve 1/3 cup of sugar. Now, some simple math will tell us that that's only about a 15% sugar solution. Now, we would need 30% for this to be a scoopable frozen dessert, so we know that it's going to be hard and icy. But that's okay, because we got a whole different ballgame going here. Now, if you were in Venice, which is where the dish originated, you might add about, a tablespoon of coffee liqueur and a pinch of citrus zest. I like to use a combination of orange and lemon. Make sure that everything's mixed together and dissolved, and we're going to pour it into a wide pan so that the liquid only comes up about 1/4 of an inch up the side of the pan. That looks about right. Now straight into the freezer for about half an hour to 45 minutes. Then the action starts. In half an hour, pay your mixture a visit and bring a fork. Scrape and break up any ice that's formed around the sides. Come back every 15 to 20 minutes and scrape new crystals as they form. This repeated tearing down of the ice produces a light, flaky texture. Now when the mixture's completely frozen, fluff it with a fork and leave it to dry for about an hour before serving. Just fill a goblet with your newly formed crystals. Top that with some barely sweetened whipped cream, maybe a little bit of lemon zest just to top things off. And there you've got it, the perfect hot summer afternoon date. Half an hour of TV time has slipped by, and the key lime sorbet has taken its last turn. Take a look. Just a bunch of big blobs of fine little crystals. Now we could serve this now, but it would melt really quick. So harden it in the freezer for a couple of hours before serving. And one more thing about ices. If you think the flavor needs more of this, a little more of that, just let it melt, make your changes, and turn it again. If you accidentally leave it out on the counter for an hour, you're actually better off letting it melt the rest of the way and returning it than you are putting it back in the freezer. There are two schools of thought regarding ice cream. One proclaims that cream or milk, eggs or egg yolks, sugar, and various flavorings should be cooked together over low heat, cooled, then frozen. Now, older cookbooks refer to this as New York ice cream, and at least 90% of the ice cream recipes written today toe this line. To me, this is not ice cream. This is frozen custard. Okay, we in the ice cream underground believe that ice cream should be just that. Milk or cream, frozen with sugar and flavorings. That's it. No double boilers, no separating eggs, no tempering yolks, no stirring for half an hour. Now, this kind of ice cream is referred to as Philadelphia-style ice cream, and it all starts right here. Now, it's tough to mess up ice cream as long as you follow some simple rules. Now, you can use almost anything from whole milk to whipping cream, alone or in combination, just as long as you avoid heavy whipping cream, or what the English call double cream. It's got too much fat in it. You'll make butter before you make ice cream. Now, light cream used to be my favorite, but you almost never see it anymore, so I go with 2 parts half and half and 1 part whipping cream. Remember the steps to our sorbet? Mix, chill, turn, and harden? Well, ice cream has a few more steps, but they're easy. For starters, I'm going to bring 2 cups of half and half and 1 cup of whipping cream to 175 degrees over medium heat. Now, if you don't have a thermometer, bring it to a bare simmer, but don't skip this step. It's going to make a huge difference to the end result. Now is also the time to add some mysterious and exotic flavor. Imagine a flower. A climbing orchid, to be exact, the one of some 20,000 varieties that produces something edible. Now imagine that its blooms must be pollinated either by hand or a small variety of Mexican bee, and that each bloom only opens for 1 day a year. Now imagine the fruit of this orchid, a pod, being picked and cured, sitting in the sun all day, sweating under blankets all night, for months until shrunken and shriveled, it develops a heady, exotic perfume and flavor. Now, imagine that this fruit's name is synonymous with dull, boring, and ordinary. How vanilla got this bad rap, I, for one, will never know. What I do know is that vanilla and ice cream were meant for one another. And to get the true essence of the bean, you got to use the bean. Regardless of the variety, the best pods have a kind of white crystalline powder on them. That's the actual vanillin, the chemical compound that provides the flavor. So the more white, the better. Now, wrapped in plastic or sealed in a glass jar and refrigerated, whole beans will keep their flavor for about 6 months. After that, they start to lose a little of their magic. For our batch of vanilla ice cream, 1 bean will be enough, but we want to get all the little black specks and pulp that comes from the inside of the bean. So just split it down the middle with a paring knife, scrape the seeds out, and put the whole thing in the pot. As soon as your mixture comes to 175 degrees, kill the heat and add your other ingredients. Now, sugar is the next big player, and for 3 cups of dairy, I usually go with 1 cup. But since I'd like some extra smoothness in my ice cream and a little accent flavor, and since I can interchange sugar directly for preserves, I'm going to remove 3 tablespoons of this sugar and replace it with 3 tablespoons of the preserves. Peach preserves, I might add. Just add that right to the mix and stir until the preserves have completely dissolved. Oh, and don't forget, pinch of salt. Okay, our vanilla ice cream mixture has come down to room temperature, and we've reached a kind of secret milestone in ice cream making. It's kind of secret that ice cream manufacturers don't let leak out of their vaults, and it's this. Age the mixture in the refrigerator for at least 6 hours, or better yet, overnight. Why? Well, with all that heat, we've put a lot of changes into motion inside the dairy, and they need time to finish doing their thing. A rested mix will create a texture that any other ice cream, even a custard-based ice cream, cannot match. And, like ices, the colder the mix is before you start turning, the finer the texture will be. Our ice cream machine is turning, and our vanilla mix is not only cold, but mellowed for 12 hours. Haven't we done this before? Anyway, time to turn. A freezing ice cream is a lot like freezing sorbet. By the time it reaches soft serve consistency, all of the ice crystals that are going to be formed in the ice cream have been, and all the air that can be worked in has been. In this case, I'd say it's about 100% air, since it's doubled in volume. Now, just like sorbet, ice cream should be hardened in the freezer for at least a couple of hours before serving. There you go. I'll be back for you in a couple hours. By the way, every time you take a sorbet or ice cream out of here, some of the smaller ice crystals are going to melt. Now, when that water refreezes, it's going to join up with larger crystals that survive the thaw. That means that every trip a sorbet or ice cream makes out into the world, the grainier it's going to be the next time around. Now, to minimize this vicious cycle, split up large homemade batches into several small containers. Then just break them out as you need them. If nasty, big grains aren't enough to convince you, ponder this. When exposed to air for long periods of time, ice cream gets leathery from surface evaporation, and it can pick up some pretty funky flavors that float around inside a freezer. So take a cue from premium ice cream makers and push a heavy layer of plastic wrap or even wax paper right down on the surface of the ice cream before you put the lid on. No exposure to air, no leathery surface. Your ice cream will thank you. Oh, and remember, ice cream and sorbet hate living in the door. So, armed with all this knowledge and you're still going to buy ice cream. It's okay. We all do. Okay, check out the fat content. Now, by law, anything calling itself ice cream has to contain at least 10% milk fat. But that's a bare minimum, okay? The good stuff will always contain more. Check it out. It's there on the side panel. Second big thing is air. By law, ice cream manufacturers can use 100% overrun. That means there's as much air by volume as there is ice cream in the carton. Here, you go weigh your half G along with some of that discount stuff down the block. Go ahead, check it out, check it out, check it out. See, since high-end ice creams will never contain anything close to 100% overrun, they'll always weigh more than less costly brands. Pretty amazing, huh? Read the ingredient list. Go ahead. look for things you'd see in homemade ice cream. Cream, egg, sugar, stuff you can pronounce. Now, emulsifiers and fillers have names only a chemist could love. You know, polysorbate 80, I mean, what's that about? So avoid them, okay? All right, well, I'm glad we had this time together. You have a good day, okay? Bye-bye. It isn't so tough to fathom General Washington's little obsession. Just a single bite of the simplest fruit ice, sorbet, sherbet, or ice cream is an enigma. It's a slap of cold giving way to a loving hug of creaminess, and textures morphing, flavors releasing in overlapping waves, and then it's a memory. No wonder ice cream rates as the top pre-adolescent sensual experience. We hope we've inspired you to dabble in the frozen arts yourself, in the privacy of your own freezer, of course. Until next time, this is Good Eats. Good Eats!
Visit us on the web at www.foodtv.com.